Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into one of New York City's darkest moments, the Happy Land fire.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack not just what happened,
Right.
but try to understand the context surrounding this tragedy and its lasting consequences.
Yeah.
Our primary source for this deep dive is going to be a detailed Wikipedia article.
Okay.
But we'll be doing more than just reciting facts here.
Sure.
You know, we're going to be analyzing those facts, connecting the dots, and really getting into the why behind this devastating event.
It's a story that unfortunately has echoes in other tragedies. We'll see similar threads of systemic failures in individual actions.
Right.
And a community forever changed.
Right. And it all began on March 25, 1990. That date alone, I don't know about you, but it sends chills down my spine because it's the same date as the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire back in 1911.
Oh, wow.
It's almost too eerie to be a coincidence, you know?
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, how could history repeat itself so tragically in the same city almost 80 years apart?
Yeah, it's a question that haunts us, isn't it? And it speaks to the importance of understanding not just what happened, but the underlying conditions that allowed it to happen.
Exactly. So let's put the Happy Land fire in context. This happened at the Happy Land Social Club in the West Farms section of the Bronx. A place meant for celebration turned into a scene of unimaginable horror.
Yeah.
87 people lost their lives.
Wow.
Making it the deadliest fire in New York City since that 1911 fire we just mentioned.
And it wasn't just any 87 people. Most of the victims were young Hondurans, many part of the Garifuna American community who were celebrating Carnival.
Right.
You know, this event ripped through a vibrant community and left scars that are still felt today.
It's heartbreaking. Now, the building itself plays a crucial role in this story. We know it was owned by Alex DiLorenzo III,
Right.
but things get a bit complicated with the leases.
Right. It was leased to Jay Weiss, and Morris Jaffer Weiss, as you might know, was married to actress Kathleen Turner at the time,
Oh, wow.
and then subleased to the club owner, Elias Cullen, who sadly perished in the fire.
So we've got these different layers of ownership and responsibility. Was that a factor in what happened?
It definitely adds a layer of complexity to the legal fallout, which we'll get to later. But here's something that raises serious questions.
Okay.
The club was under an eviction notice. The trial was scheduled for just 3 days after the fire.
Hold on. So they were already in legal trouble.
Yes, and it goes even further back.
Oh, jeez.
Happy Land had been ordered to close in 1988
Wow.
for serious building code violations.
Right.
No fire exits, no alarms, no sprinklers. The list goes on.
Wow.
And what's even more concerning is there's no record of any follow-up by the fire department to ensure those violations were addressed.
It's like a ticking time bomb that everyone knew about.
Right.
But no one did enough to defuse. This
Yeah.
wasn't just an accident. It was a disaster waiting to happen.
That's a powerful way to put it. And it raises questions about responsibility that go beyond the individual who set the fire.
Speaking of which, we need to talk about Julio Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Who was this man and what led him to commit such a horrific act?
Gonzalez was a Cuban refugee with a rather complicated past.
Okay.
He'd served time in Cuba for desertion from the army.
Right.
And then, to secure his escape during the Mariel boat lift, he actually fabricated a criminal record,
Really?
claiming to be a drug dealer.
Wait, the Mariel boat lift, that was in 1980, right? A massive exodus of Cubans fleeing to the U.S.
Exactly. It was a chaotic time fueled by political tensions and desperation. The boat lift brought over 125,000 Cubans to the U.S.
Wow.
And while many were fleeing legitimate hardship, there was also an element of Fidel Castro using the opportunity to rid Cuba of some undesirable individuals, including criminals.
So Gonzalez was part of that wave, and his falsified criminal history allowed him to slip through the cracks. But how does this tie into the Happy Land fire?
Well, by 1990, Gonzalez was living in New York, and things weren't going well for him.
Okay.
He was unemployed, behind on rent, and embroiled in a volatile relationship with his ex-girlfriend, Lydia Feliciano,
Right.
who happened to work at the Happy Land Club.
So the club wasn't just a random target. There was a personal connection.
Right.
It seems like Gonzalez was already in a very dark place,
Yeah,
and then things escalated even further.
they did. On the night of the fire, Gonzalez went to Happy Land and had a major argument with Feliciano. He was trying to convince her to quit her job,
Uh-huh.
but she rejected him. Things got heated, and he was thrown out of the club. Witnesses said he was shouting threats as he left, things like, "I'll shut this place down and I'll be coming back."
Those words are so chilling in hindsight. It's like he was already planning something terrible.
And tragically, he was. Gonzalez didn't just storm off into the night. He went to a gas station, bought $1's worth of gasoline, and
Wow.
then returned to Happy Land with a terrifying purpose in mind.
$1 worth of gasoline? It's almost unfathomable that such a small purchase could lead to such immense devastation. What happened next?
He poured the gasoline at the base of the only staircase leading into the club,
Oh, gosh.
the only way in or out for all those people inside,
Right.
and then he lit it.
It's hard to even fathom the terror that must have ensued inside that club. So many people trapped, with only one way out and a fire fueled by gasoline.
The fire spread with terrifying speed. Smoke filled the club in minutes, and smoke, as we know, is often the deadliest aspect of a fire.
Right, it's not necessarily the flames that get you, but the toxic fumes.
Exactly. When we talk about smoke inhalation, we're not just talking about a bit of coughing. The smoke from a fire contains a deadly cocktail of gases, including carbon monoxide, which binds to your red blood cells and prevents them from carrying oxygen. Then there's hydrogen cyanide, which directly attacks your cell's ability to use oxygen.
So it's a suffocating effect at the cellular level.
Precisely. And it happens fast. In a fire like this, with such rapid smoke production, people could have been incapacitated within seconds. Most of the victims at Happy Land died from asphyxiation or were trampled in the frantic scramble to escape.
Reading about these details, it's almost impossible to comprehend the chaos and panic that must have unfolded.
Imagine the scene: a crowded club, music playing, people dancing, and then suddenly, smoke, darkness, and the realization that there's only one way out. Reports from the scene are just harrowing. Some victims were found with drinks still in their hands. They had no time to react, no chance to escape.
It's a stark reminder of how fragile life is and how quickly things can turn from celebration to tragedy.
It is. And it's not just the immediate victims we need to think about. There were a handful of survivors, including Gonzalez's ex-girlfriend, Lydia Feliciano, and the club's DJ, Ruben Valadares. They managed to escape the inferno, but they suffered severe burns, both physical and psychological.
I can only imagine the trauma they carried with them. It's a reminder that even for those who survived, the scars run deep. What about Gonzalez? What happened to him after he set the fire?
It's hard to imagine the mindset of someone who could commit such a horrific act. But reports suggest that Gonzalez went home after setting the fire. He changed clothes and went to sleep.
It's chilling. It speaks to a complete lack of remorse, or even comprehension of the magnitude of what he had done.
He was arrested the next day and confessed to the crime.
So then the question becomes, what kind of justice can be served in a case like this?
The trial was highly publicized. Gonzalez was indicted on 174 counts of murder, 2 for each victim, 1 for intentional murder, and another for depraved indifference to human life. He was found guilty on all counts.
174 counts of murder. That's staggering.
It reflects the enormity of his crime. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison and became eligible for parole in 2015.
Was he granted parole?
Thankfully, no. He was denied parole and died in prison in 2016. But his conviction and sentencing don't tell the whole story. There's also the question of accountability for the building owners and those who knew about the dangerous conditions.
Right. You mentioned earlier that the club had been ordered to close for code violations. So where does the responsibility lie beyond Gonzalez himself?
It's a complex issue. The Bronx district attorney initially stated that the building owners and leaseholders wouldn't be criminally charged because they had attempted to close the club and evicted the tenant.
But they knew about the dangerous conditions. Isn't that a form of negligence?
That was the argument made by many in the community and in the media. There was a sense that someone had to be held accountable for allowing this tragedy to happen. The public outcry ultimately led to misdemeanor charges being filed against the building owner, Alex DiLorenzo III, and the primary leaseholder, Jay Weiss.
Misdemeanor charges? That seems incredibly lenient considering 87 people lost their lives.
It does raise questions about whether the punishment fit the crime. The legal argument was that their actions, or inaction, didn't directly cause the fire, Gonzalez did.
Yeah.
But their failure to address the code violations created a death trap.
It's like that saying, justice delayed is justice denied. If they had acted on those violations back in 1988, who knows how many lives could have been saved?
Exactly. It speaks to the need for stricter enforcement of building codes and a more proactive approach to safety regulations. But the legal ramifications didn't end there. There was also a massive civil lawsuit.
Oh, right. I remember reading about a huge settlement.
The victims' families filed a $5 billion lawsuit against the owner, landlord, the city, and even some building material manufacturers, It was a long and complicated legal battle, but eventually it was settled for $15.8 million.
That's still a significant sum, but it's nowhere near the initial $5 billion. How do courts even determine these settlements?
It's a complex process that involves evaluating liability, damages, and legal precedent. In cases like this, with multiple defendants and complex legal issues, settlements are often reached to avoid lengthy and costly trials. But $15.8 million, while seemingly substantial, pales in comparison to the immeasurable loss of life. No amount of money can truly compensate for that.
That's very true. So, beyond the legal battles and settlements, how has the Happy Land fire been memorialized? How is the memory of those who died being kept alive?
The street where the Happy Land Social Club stood was renamed the Plaza of the 87 to honor the victims. There's also a memorial across from the former club site, a somber space with the names of all 87 victims inscribed. These memorials serve as a tangible reminder of the tragedy and ensure that the victims' names and stories are not forgotten.
It's so important to remember to learn from the past and to strive to prevent such tragedies from happening again. But memorials aren't the only way the Happy Land fire has resonated. It's had a lasting impact on popular culture as well.
You're right. The Happy Land fire has been the subject of documentaries, books, and even a Law and Order episode.
Oh, wow.
Musicians like Duran Duran and Joe Jackson were also inspired to write songs about the tragedy, reflecting on the loss and raising questions about accountability.
Yeah.
It seems that even in its aftermath, the fire continues to spark important conversations.
It's a testament to the enduring power of this event, how it continues to resonate with people on a human level. We've talked about the systemic failures, the individual actions, and the legal battles, but ultimately this is a story about people. People who went out to celebrate and never came home,
Right.
families torn apart by unimaginable grief, a community left grappling with the aftermath.
And it's a story that unfortunately has parallels to other tragedies, like the Ghost Ship Warehouse fire in Oakland in 2016.
That fire was devastating too. 36 people died in that one. What were the similarities to the Happy Land fire?
Well, like Happy Land, the Ghost Ship Warehouse was being used illegally for parties.
Right.
It was a space that wasn't up to code, lacked proper safety measures, and essentially became a death trap when a fire broke out. Both tragedies highlight a dangerous trend of turning unsafe spaces into venues for entertainment.
It's almost as if some people have become desensitized to the risks, or perhaps they just assume that someone else is taking care of safety.
It's a combination of factors, really. We have building owners cutting corners, authorities failing to enforce codes, and individuals assuming that everything will be okay. It's a recipe for disaster.
And it's not just about nightclubs or warehouses. We've seen similar tragedies in residential buildings with inadequate fire escapes or faulty wiring. It's a systemic problem that needs to be addressed at multiple levels.
Absolutely. We need stricter building codes, proactive inspections, and a culture that prioritizes safety above all else. And it's not just the responsibility of landlords or authorities. We as individuals need to be more aware of our surroundings and speak up if we see something that seems unsafe.
It's like the old saying, see something, say something. But in this case, it could be life-saving.
Exactly. We need to shift our mindset from complacency to vigilance.
Well said. This entire deep dive has been incredibly informative, but also deeply unsettling. It's a reminder that tragedy can strike anywhere, anytime, and that we all have a role to play in preventing it.
I agree. It's a story that stays with you, not just for the horror of what happened, but for the questions it raises about responsibility, accountability, and our collective obligation to create a safer world.
So to our listeners out there, we leave you with this. What can you do in your own community to make sure something like the Happy Land fire never happens again? Maybe it's being more aware of fire safety measures when you go out, or maybe it's reporting a potential hazard to the authorities. Every action, no matter how small, can make a difference. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into a truly impactful event. We encourage you to keep learning, keep questioning, and keep striving for a safer future.